time for The World This Week. And this Friday, I'm joined in the studio by my two guests, Christopher Dickey, who's the foreign editor of The Daily Beast. Hello. And Inti Landoro, the Wall Street Journal's former correspondent in Colombia. Gentlemen, hello. Thank you for being with us. Now, we're going to start with the ongoing crisis in Venezuela. Leaders of the opposition are urging citizens to fill the streets of the capital this Friday to reject the assembly elected in a controversial poll last Sunday. Charged with rewriting the constitution, the all-powerful group will supersede all other government branches. And despite widespread condemnation, those 545 delegates are now being installed at the Legislative Palace in a room that's just a stone's throw away from the chamber where the opposition-controlled National Assembly had been meeting. And Maduro has said he'll use the assembly to punish his opponents, and he plans to attend this opening session. Now, let me turn to you perhaps first, Inti. As I said, the opposition has been staging a rally, but also pro-Maduro supporters, and they're staging a march in Caracas. What allegiances can Maduro still count on at this stage?
Well, I think very few people. In a country with such a dire economic situation, I don't think a lot of people would support a sitting president or his attempt to change the political rules of the country. But he still has he still dominates power in the country. He still dominates the army. So, and he just managed to get his constituent assembly sworn in. So I don't think many people support him, but he has all the apparatus of the state supporting him.
This is quite a huge win for him today, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a huge win, and I think the problem is that while many people don't like him, maybe the vast majority don't like him, they haven't been able to mobilize, particularly in recent weeks and months, they haven't been able to mobilize the huge mass rallies that might have said to the whole world, this guy's going, or more to the point, that might have said to the military, this guy's got to go.
You need to change sides.
You need to change sides. That didn't happen. That was supposed to happen the Saturday before or the Friday before the elections. It didn't happen.
Why not?
Well, the reason that was given by the opposition is that the government announced all kinds of draconian punishments for people who turned out for these demonstrations. But that doesn't seem very convincing if we're talking about really trying to change the government. I think people are kind of exhausted. I mean, maybe Inti has a better sense of this than I do. But I think that the opposition no longer inspires the masses. People are exhausted by Maduro. They're also totally preoccupied with how they're going to survive from one day to the next. And when people are just trying to survive from one day to the next, it's hard to tell them they need to use up their time going into the streets by the hundreds of thousands or millions, especially if in the end nothing changes.
Is the opposition sufficiently united? Does it need to change strategy perhaps at this stage?
I think maybe the opposition lacks the charismatic leadership that could make a difference. But also I think they are trying, what the opposition is trying to do is to get to force the government into a peaceful negotiation, a peaceful transition. And that is what the government is rejecting. And even though a lot of people, as you were saying, are more preoccupied about what they're going to eat tonight and tomorrow, the opposition is not really into a revolution. So it leaves us in a difficult situation, I think, where more protests are will probably happen, more violence, but Maduro stays in power and remains in control of, of the government.
If the pressure is petering out perhaps from within, perhaps it come from outside. Regionally, the starts regarding Maduro could toughen this weekend. There's a Mercosur meeting that's taking place this weekend, and they're looking at suspending Venezuela for good. Would that make a difference?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Agreement.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, oh, gee, that's too bad, and go back to doing exactly what he was doing before. You know, even as the Trump administration and Obama before him have tried to put some pressure on Venezuela, even when they talk about imposing sanctions, they still aren't willing to impose the kind of really heavy sanctions that would bring the entire country down to its knees. But it can be argued, certainly, that even if they did that, they'd bring the country to its knees, but they wouldn't necessarily take Maduro out of power. I mean, I think the thing that we mentioned before is really the key here. Is the army willing to change sides? The army is really the only power that can change things now.
And how is he holding the army? What is it that the army has that's keeping it on his side?
It's partly corruption. It's largely corruption. And wisely moving people around and cutting deals with the senior leaders of the military who know who to put where so that there's no coup d'etat. But eventually these things change, and we've seen some people, some fractures showing even within the Chavista establishment. With the woman who's the
Ortega, the Attorney General.
The Attorney General. She's coming out as if she's going to lead the opposition. Well, maybe she will, but it's not clear where she's going to go with this.
And you used the word sanctions. Sorry, Inti, you were...
Yeah, no, the structure of the economy is making the military interest in staying, in supporting the government. Because right now, the fact that you have an exchange rate controlled, a controlled exchange rate that some people have access to. And
especially the military.
Exactly, especially for the military. And then the military are running a lot of the companies that were seized by the government. So all these people running the country's economy will lose a lot.
Yeah, but there's a clear conflict of interest there.
Well, more than that. It's plainly corruption. It's plainly people looting the country. And these people have no interest in letting it go. Yeah,
and can't those people be targeted by sanctions? I mean, we're hearing a lot of condemnation from abroad, but even Europe hasn't imposed a single sanction so far.
Well, you can develop a more elaborate sanctions regime that tries to target those people, more or less like the Americans are trying and others are trying to do with Russia. You sort of say, here are these guys, here are their cronies,
freeze
that's
their
who we'll go after. You freeze their assets when you can find their assets. I mean, that's what you do. But I don't think that we've seen a huge amount of success with sanctions. Sanctions are sort of a fallback position for Western governments that can't decide what the hell they want to do. That don't want to go to war, obviously, that don't have the diplomatic power to change things, that don't have the covert operations that would change things. So they say, we'll impose sanctions, and they all look very legitimate, and some people suffer economically. Sometimes people suffer very, very serious economic problems. But it doesn't, I can't think of any case, except maybe South Africa, where it led to
sanctions led to any change.
It led to any change.
And in the case of Cuba, it didn't. It was even used up to a certain point by the Castro government to justify the hardship on the people.
No, and as Inti pointed out, I mean, you look at how long there were sanctions against Saddam Hussein. He didn't go until the American army rolled into Baghdad. And why is that? Because essentially, when you have sanctions, you criminalize all commerce, and the people who are best in positioned to take advantage of that criminality, that mafia, is the government, is a corrupt government, which is exactly what you're talking about in Venezuela.
Okay, well, let's move now to the second theme of our debate. The US and the ongoing probes into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. The Wall Street Journal first broke this new twist. Robert Mueller, who was appointed special counsel following the firing of FBI Director James Comey in May, is reported to be using a grand jury in Washington as part of the investigation. So, Christopher Dickey, is this significant? Should Trump be afraid?
Yeah, I think Trump should be afraid. I think it's not just because of the grand jury. I think you listen to a lot of commentators will tell you, of course he's using a grand jury. That's what a special prosecutor does, so it's really not a big deal. But, oh, yes, it is a very big deal. It's a milestone to know that he's impaneled a grand jury, that they have subpoena power, that they're going to go after a lot of different people. That's a major development in this story. Now, is this going to take Trump out of office? No. This is just going to eat away at his credibility. It's going to reinforce the feeling, particularly in the national security community, that he is a very unreliable figure, to say the least. It's going to demoralize a lot of people in his administration. I think we're going to see many people who were involved in his campaign and some who were involved in the administration eventually not only called before the grand jury, but indicted for various crimes. Not big crimes, not high treason, but obstruction of justice, issues like that. All of that said, as long as the economy in the United States continues to be doing as well as it's doing, I don't think there's a prayer in hell that even if he were to be impeached by the House which, by the way, is dominated by Republicans who can't seem to decide on anything, then I don't think he would be convicted by the Senate. Just as even when Bill Clinton was impeached by the House, he wasn't convicted by the Senate, essentially because people felt prosperous under his administration.
So this is just a waiting game now?
Yes, I think the case will dog Donald Trump for the rest of his administration, and the lesson we can maybe draw from the Watergate case and from Bill Clinton is that basically it's a question of how well the economy is doing and how popular is the president, whether he is being impeached or not. Well, Richard Nixon was not really impeached, but he had.
Well, Richard Nixon,
to
compared to Donald Trump, was a man of honor. I mean, he really, and when he saw that he was going to be impeached, rather than to submit to that humiliation, he decided to resign. He was only going to be impeached, by the way, because he had systematically lied to Congress about the tapes of his collusion in the cover-up of the Watergate break-in.
Well, and
it was only when Congress actually physically, not a transcript, physically got that tape that he knew he was toast. And that's when he resigned.
Well, but Bill Clinton had lied under oath.
Well, I didn't say Clinton was a man of honor, did I?
No, of course. But he remained in power, and he wasn't. He was far from being impeached or.
Well, he was impeached, and far from being convicted by the Senate. Yes.
And so he remained in office. So I think the situation is for Donald Trump is whether he is popular enough, whether the economy is doing well enough for him to remain in power. Not exactly about the misdemeanor, the grand jury can find.
No, but I think that his problems with the national security establishment are really extremely dangerous. And things are happening, like the leak of the transcripts of his discussions with foreign leaders, with Mexico and Australia. You know, that may be going too far. There are things that come out of the national security establishment that that's not really going to hurt Trump. That's just sniping at him. And I'm not sure that's a good idea, but I'm sure I know the reason. I think that many people in the national security establishment feel that essentially whether he was colluding or complicit with Russia intentionally or out of ignorance, it doesn't really matter. He and the people around him essentially betrayed the United States. People like Comey, the fired FBI director, Mueller, the special prosecutor, Brennan, the former CIA director, Clapper, the former director of national intelligence. It's clear they think this guy's a traitor, and they're going to continue to go after him.
Well, that's what we're going to leave this on. Thank you very much to you both, Christopher Dickey and Inti Landuro. Thank you for having been with us for This World This Week. And thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.
The Observer's Direct, presented by Derek Thompson.
The pine forests of northern Ukraine, devastated by illegal mining. Amber can be worth $5,000 a kilo, and our observers say it's led to a ruthless business, deep in the heart of the forest, pitting miners against the police, with the forest losing out. It's on the next Observer's Direct.
The Observer's Direct, on France 24 and France24.com.